go. I have a strong sense of doing what's right, speaking up and speaking out, doing it until someone listens. The standards are set so low, especially in Missouri.
I hope to get out of this story that MoNet is looked at. Me and my wife was putting in floor joists in our kitchen. Got my hand a little bit too close to the blade, severed my pinky and ring finger, 99%, and I no longer have coverage anymore.
So people who are eligible aren't accessing Medicaid coverage that they need.
Often these people don't have a voice otherwise, so we need to actually think about it from their perspective. So where does this process break down?
Missouri has 1.3 million people enrolled in its Medicaid program. That's about 1 in 5 people in the state. And the Department of Social Services has struggled to facilitate that healthcare system for years now, ultimately leaving people who qualify without coverage. I'm Matt Woods with First Alert 4, and in this feature, I talk to people who are navigating the state's Medicaid program, the roadblocks they encountered along the way, and what federal legislation might do to impact it.
We wanted to get away from Texas and move, someplace, and I saw the pictures that they had of this house on Zillow, and I said, hey, I want to see the house in person. Up until then, we had never heard of Louisiana, Missouri. We had no clue that the town was here, we'd never been to this part of Missouri. And so we just came up here and we looked at the house, and we both decided that we fell in love with the house, so we bought it. Last October, I was cutting a floor joist with my table saw. Got my hand a little bit too close to the blade, severed my pinky and ring finger, 99%. Almost cut my middle finger in half and took the tip of my index finger off completely. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd say about a 25. That's the worst pain I've ever felt in my life.
Don Carter went here to Pike County Memorial Hospital after the accident. He got several pain injections, and the medical staff decided to transport him by helicopter to BJC here in St. Louis. There, he had his fingers surgically reattached, but after all that emergency care, he didn't have insurance.
Had a case manager come by and tell me that since I didn't have insurance and all that they was going to get me on Medicaid. And at that time, I asked him what that was for, because I've never used it.
Carter had a manufacturing job lined up and was supposed to start days after the accident. But then he needed social services, which he got initial approval for, according to this letter. His main need was physical therapy, and that's where the roadblocks for Carter began.
I called the Medicaid number and I said, hey, I'm needing physical therapy. Do y'all have some kind of list, or can you refer me to someone? I'm fairly new to the state, and I don't know. The first couple of names that they gave me were for some places in Illinois. And I called them back and said, hey, they don't even take this. This is a whole different state. Oh, well, that's all we have on our list.
And sitting here today, it's almost June.
Yeah.
Have you gotten physical therapy?
No, sir.
Carter's problems compounded when he got another letter from DSS. It looks nearly identical to the one he got before, but this time it said he was rejected from Mo HealthNet.
Dated 5/5 of 2025. A review of your family Mo HealthNet case has been completed and found the below members will no longer qualify. Don Carter does not qualify for adult expansion group because they are not a permanent resident of Missouri.
Despite Carter saying he provided the necessary documentation, he was still denied. I verified through online court records that he bought his home in Pike County a year ago.
And I no longer have coverage anymore.
In St. Charles County, I found another family willing to talk to me. Joe and Kayla Corica fell on hard times of their own. Kayla was already living with a disability and received social services for that.
Severe panic attacks, anxiety. That's the main thing that I've always struggled with.
Their lives were complicated when her husband Joe had a massive seizure. He was recording himself when it happened, playing a video game with friends. He starts to stutter in the video.
Dang it.
Two of them in there.
And then about 30 seconds later, he's in the hallway when there's a loud thud. That's Joe hitting the floor as his condition worsened.
Progressing into a grand mal seizure, and I almost lost him from that.
Then they found out he had a rare brain cancer. These scans show where it formed. Joe was the one that provided for the family with his IT job.
So I used up all my vacation time trying to wait as long as I could, but eventually I just had to quit the job.
Joe applied for Medicaid to get cancer care.
Hi, how are you?
I'm
nice
doing
to
good.
see you.
Thank you. Nice to see you too.
Have you had any change in how you feel since
No.
you started all of this?
If anything, I feel a little bit better today than I did like 3 or 4 weeks ago.
And Kayla switched to a pregnancy coverage plan. But their problems started when Kayla needed coverage for things not related to the baby, like mental health needs and vision problems.
We kept trying to get her switched off of her pregnancy coverage to something else, like basically what me and the baby now have. Nobody could explain to us how to do that. We kept calling, and every time we called, we'd get somebody different who would tell us to do something different. And then when we would do what they said, they'd be like, oh, no, that person told you wrong. When we called back, they would be another person. They'd say, oh, that person told you wrong. Every time you call, you have to wait on hold for minimum 3 or 4 hours, sometimes 6 hours. So you have to set like a whole day aside to wait on hold.
The Department of Social Services struggles to handle the 1.3 million people on MoHealthNet are not new. And the call center was a chief complaint from Coricas and Carter. They tried making their voices heard through the state's new government efficiency portal. They, along with several others, wrote about long delays.
Their wait time to talk to a live person is usually around 3 to 4 hours. I had actually fell asleep and when the lady come on the phone. And I explained to her, I said, ma'am, I'm sorry. I said, you have to give me a minute, because I said I'd actually fell asleep while waiting on you.
After I reached out to them, Carter and the Coricas agreed to talk to me about the roadblocks they've encountered that have made getting health care more difficult.
Mental health care, therapy. I've needed a therapist for a long time now. And it angers me. Not just for me, but for everyone else.
To get some perspective on these issues, I talked to local experts. Tim McBride served on the MoHealthNet Oversight Committee for 9 years until 2018. And Amy Bluen started a nonprofit that researches Medicaid.
Missouri Budget Project formed in 2003, and we serve as a think tank, really, on state and federal issues and how they impact Missourians.
I've been studying health policy for over 30 years, and mostly the Medicare and Medicaid programs and the marketplaces under the Affordable Care Act.
Many of these issues have a much stronger impact for low and middle income folks.
The state has an interesting history. In some ways, we're one of the best states in the country in terms of our Medicaid program. We've been historically generous in terms of children, but yet we've had historically low eligibility coverage rates for other categories.
Missouri voters passed Medicaid expansion in 2020, increasing eligibility for hundreds of thousands of adults living up to 138% of the poverty line, or $21,597 a year. But processing applications and renewals still proves to be a challenge. Is the state handling its current burden right now?
No. I mean, the state of Missouri has been redirected, if you will, by the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare because of its failure to meet time requirements, the quick processing of applications.
We have probably objectively the worst call center numbers in the country. We have the longest wait times in the country, about an hour. People wait 50 minutes to an hour just to get their call answered. And at various times it's between the worst and the fourth worst in the country.
In response to public records requests, DSS said that number was 37 minutes for April, although it can vary throughout the year. I also found there are 1,086 benefit program technicians that assist with the call center. 72% of those employees have been in their position for at least a year.
And then the other metric they use is how many people just give up and hang up, and we're at about 50%. And that's maybe not the worst in the country, but it's in the top 5.
As people currently fall through the cracks in Missouri due to bureaucracy, there's federal legislation looming that could result in more people losing coverage.
The U.S. House passed the budget resolution, which will make the most significant cuts to Medicaid in the history of the program. We have work requirements for people in the Medicaid expansion group. There are increased cost payments or co-payments for people in the Medicaid expansion group, and there's basically additional red tape for everybody.
We annually verify their enrollment once a year. If this legislation goes through, we'll do it twice a year.
All of that requires some sort of documentation to be processed by the Department of Social Services, and they currently can't do it well.
The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities estimates 91,000 Missourians would lose coverage due to a work requirement. The Urban Institute estimates between 84 and 96,000 would lose coverage. Local Representative Ann Wagner voted for the bill, saying it, quote, strengthened and reformed Medicaid. Another local representative, Wesley Bell, voted against it, saying it would gut Medicaid. On the Senate side, Missouri's Josh Hawley has been outspoken against proposed copays in the bill.
I mean, this whole idea of we're going to charge them now additional copays in order to access health care, I have to say that just sounds like a tax to me.
The Republican even wrote an op-ed in the New York Times titled, "Don't Cut Medicaid." Missouri Senator Eric Schmidt came out in favor of proposed work requirements in the bill. That provision is one that Hawley said he supports as well. That change, though, would put an increased workload on states to process paperwork.
They would absolutely need to hire more people. In fact, the Department of Social Services requested an additional 200 staff in their budget request this year to the governor. The governor did not include that in his recommendation for the budget.
I'm thinking about this from the state government's perspective and the individual's perspective, that this is going to get a lot worse. And that's why we're worried, is because, again, they're going to have to do 2 to 3 to 4 times as much work with only maybe 50 new staff.
In a state that already struggles.
In a state that's already struggling and has got some of the worst numbers in the country. Yeah. That's where I'm worried.
They said it's moving towards the motor centers of my brain. And yeah, if I ever suddenly can't move this arm or whatever, or, I'm struggling to move in the way that I want, that's probably when I would start looking into making out a will or something like that. Right now, it's almost unbelievable still that I have it, because after they took the tumor out and there was a bit of a recovery period there, but up until the seizure, I had never had any symptoms at all.
I'm hoping that with therapy, I will be able to get some grip strength back to where I can bend and flex my fingers and use them some way to do some kind of job. I'm asking Medicaid to assist me in getting the physical therapy that I need so that I can rejoin the workforce and all that. And once I'm done with all that, I may not need Medicaid anymore.